Cheers.
Yeah. If everybody could sign in, if you're planning to speak, we're going to get started in about 30 seconds. Also, thank you for being here. Awesome. You can sit here for a second. Can she sit here for a second? Oh, no, that's Pedro. Gonna speak. Can we please bring this public hearing, open the public hearing? Clerks, would you mind bringing the sign-in sheets? While she does that, I just want to thank everyone for being here today to hear public hearing on the building energy reporting ordinance. I'm particularly excited about this. I'm just going to say very few quick words. So I am Councilwoman Anderbois. I am the chair of this special committee on energy or the environment and resilience, and really excited for our first public hearing on the building energy reporting ordinance. As you guys know, climate crisis is real. It's urgent. This last week was the hottest week on record in all of human history. And every city across the country and across the world needs to be acting in big ways and small to address this crisis. I want to express gratitude first to Chairwoman Anthony, Chairwoman of Finance, who introduced this same legislation in 2021. Wish it would have passed then, but late is better than never. And I'm really grateful for all of her leadership. She is on this committee, and I'm excited for her leadership on all things environment. Just two quick notes. What this ordinance would do is to help us track and benchmark the energy use of the city's largest buildings. And it would start with the very largest and add smaller and smaller buildings over time. It really gets at the point that you can't manage what you don't measure. And so we want to make sure that as we are addressing climate, we're doing it in these small technical ways. We're going to do it in big ways, all the ways. But we have to first start with this kind of benchmarking and measurement, especially of our buildings, which are some of our largest carbon emitters. We will not be voting on this tonight. We do really value public input. That's the whole point of having a public hearing. So really excited to hear all of your input tonight, and the committee will be voting on this in the fall. We really want to make sure we're incorporating your comments to make it stronger. And what else do I want to say? Nope, that is it. We're going to open it for public comment, and I'm going to start with and before we get started, can the clerk please read item 1 into the record?
Ordinance amending Chapter 5, Building and Structural Appurtenances of the Code of Ordinances to add Article 10, Building Energy Reporting Program.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to first invite Director of Sustainability, Priscilla De La Cruz, to give testimony first. Thank you so much, Priscilla.
Thank you, Chairwoman Anderwa. As Chairwoman mentioned, I am the Director of Sustainability for the City of Providence, officially day number 6 on the job. Want to also recognize our Chief of Policy and Resiliency, Sheila Dormady, and my awesome Deputy of Sustainability, Kevin Prov. Although my Deputy Director, Kevin Prov, has asked me not to use awesome, I will continue to do that forever. And also I am very eager to hear the public testimony today as we work with this committee and the rest of the City Council and within the administration to move forward the Building Energy Reporting Program. As Councilwoman Anderwa mentioned, this is a time we didn't do it then, but all the stars are aligning to move this forward. And with that said, of course, I am here on behalf of the administration to be a partner and a collaborator on all things sustainability and resiliency. When it comes to the Building Energy Reporting Program, we're of course supportive and ready to work with this body to ensure that we can successfully administer a building energy reporting program. And one of the things that we have outlined in the comments that we have already provided, so I won't read through our full comments, but what I do want to highlight in summary, we do acknowledge that the building energy reporting would further the implementation of our city's climate justice plan. So it's all about meeting our climate goals, and this is one of the vehicles towards how we can get there, considering that buildings account for 70% of our carbon emissions. And one of the things that I echo our Chief of Policy, Sheila, saying we can't manage what we can't measure. So this is one of the essential tools that we need in order to reach our climate goals. In that said, another thing that our Department of Sustainability is very conscious of, and we highlighted in our comments, is that we want to strike the right balance. Of course, we want to focus in what is the essence of this ordinance, which is ramping down the energy use of larger buildings and not putting a burden or really enforcing this on like smaller mom and pop businesses like bodegas on Broad Street or retail shops on Hope Street. But that's really where your public input comes into play, and also hearing from the smaller businesses what they think about the building ordinance as well. And that in order to effectively administer such program, we are going to work closely with this body to ensure that our department has the adequate staffing and the software resources that are needed to implement the program. When we think about program implementation, really looking for an implementation schedule that's feasible, considering the resources that we have, but most importantly, the resources that we will need to administer the program, because it's not only about successfully guiding these building owners to comply with the ordinance and the reporting deadlines, but also ensuring that we're driving these building owners to access energy efficiency improvements. That's where we're going to be able to really drive that reduction in emissions. One of the things that we have seen across other cities that have successfully embarked on implementing their building ordinance is that building owners are often surprised by how much they can cut their energy usage. Upwards of 20 to 30% with really short payback periods. So for us, all in all, of course, this is an important tool. Like I've mentioned, energy savings are not only going to result in money savings, but will overall have a positive impact on our economy, the environment, and the public health of our Providence residents. So I will stop there and keep it high level. Like I mentioned, we submitted something more detailed. And beyond that, we have even more detailed and research that Kevin, our deputy, has done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director De La Cruz. Awesome. I would also remiss to not have mentioned the other committee members. Thank you, Vice Chair Sanchez, for being here, and Councilman Espinal, as well as our fantastic, amazing clerks for being here today. So we're just gonna go right into the public testimony. If Peter Asen wants to pop up. Hey, Peter. And if you could just, for everybody, state your name and your address, would be really helpful.
Thank you. My name is Peter Asen, A-S-E-N. I'm here, I'm going to use as my address, my work address, because I'm here on behalf of Providence Housing Authority, which is 100 Broad Street in Providence. I'm the Deputy Director of Development and Governmental Affairs for the PHA, and actually among the many different things that I do work on at PHA are our energy initiatives as well. I do want to say that PHA is very concerned and interested in trying to reduce our energy costs, reduce our energy use, and wherever possible, move away from fossil fuel energy for the buildings that we own and operate. We own and operate 2,606 units of rental housing in the city of Providence, and believe that we're the biggest landlord in the city, as well as perhaps even in the state of Rhode Island. I also just will say on a personal point that I have my 9-year-old son here today, and I am very concerned about the future of the planet that we're leaving him and his generation and my daughter's generation as well. I have talked to the chairwoman. I appreciate her openness for input from the affordable housing community on this ordinance. As a general rule or overall, because of the work that we do support on what the council is trying to do. But we have a few more kind of technical suggestions that were laid out in a letter that we sent. One minor thing that we suggested would be that if the residential exemption for smaller properties could be increased from 10 units to 12 units, I think that could be a major help to us. And then there's a couple of things that are more just clarifications that may be the intent, but I just thought could be clarified that, for example, we have a number of family developments that have a lot of smaller buildings next to each other. I think the plain reading of it is that you're talking about individual buildings, but this was a concern that Rhode Island Housing also expressed to me, was making sure that it's clear that if you have a couple buildings next to each other in a single lot or development, for example, that those would be considered separately for the purposes of this. Another clarification piece, I do think it's there in the language of 5-130-15, which is to say that, you know, this information would be provided by Rhode Island Energy. Most of our developments, we actually do pay the utilities, and the tenant's rent covers their utilities. We do have a few cases where the tenant actually pays it and then their rent is kind of reduced by a utility allowance. I know for some private affordable housing, there's a lot where the tenant pays it. And we just want to make sure when we're talking about residential properties that have a large number of units where the tenants pay their utility, that we will not be required to get releases from each tenant authorizing National Grid or Rhode Island Energy to share the information with us. If the program allows us to get the summary information without having to get that approval from each tenant, I think that's what we hope, and concern about the burden of doing that otherwise. The one other thing I just will mention in terms of our commitment is that we are right now, in the month of August, we have a consultant coming to do energy audits of all of our developments. We are hoping with that information to go through and make a lot of improvements. You know, the concern for affordable housing is just the limited kind of rental revenue that we have. So I really appreciate the fact I know the chairwoman and I know the administration are interested in finding ways to support affordable housing providers in getting the resources we need to make those improvements. And we definitely are interested in working with you on that going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Peter. And welcome to Peter's son. Awesome. Next, we have Aaron Ritter.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Chairperson Anderbois, as well as the other members of the committee for being here. My name and address, 45 Hidden Street. And Aaron Ritter, E-R-I-N-R-I-T-T-E-R. I'm from the Conservation Law Foundation, a nonprofit environmental advocacy organization that works to protect the environment and public health throughout New England. And I also live in Providence, as I mentioned, over in Ward 2. and I'm here to speak in support of the building energy reporting ordinance. As Priscilla mentioned previously, buildings account for over 70% of greenhouse gas emissions in Providence. So improving their energy efficiency is absolutely critical for the city to achieve its goals of carbon neutrality by 2050, as well as the mandates of the Act on Climate. By requiring large building owners to report their building's emissions through benchmarking and then giving this data to the city, this will reduce bills for business owners, as well as reducing emissions and conserving energy across the city of Providence. Benchmarking means measuring a building's energy use and then comparing it to an average of similar buildings. It allows owners and occupants to understand their building's relative energy performance and help identify opportunities to cut energy waste and be more efficient. More efficient buildings save residents and businesses money while combating the current climate crisis. Because the cleanest, cheapest energy is the energy that we don't use at all. This ordinance represents meaningful action that the city's buildings to decarbonize the city's buildings and lower energy for residents across Providence. We ask that you support the passage of it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Erin. Next is Greg Garrett.
Good evening, members of the committee. My name is Greg Garrett, Gerritt. I live at 37 6th Street. Climate is the existential crisis of our time. If we do not deal with the climate crisis, we're not going to have much of a city. We'll flood, we'll be underwater, in really deep trouble. We also won't have an economy. If we do not put climate at the very center of our economic development planning, we're not going to have an economy 20, 30 years out. The amount of damage that the climate crisis will do makes it absolutely essential that we start doing things right now. As Councilwoman Anderbaugh said, if you want to understand what you've got to measure it. If you want to fix something, you have to actually know how big it is and what you've got there. I used to be a carpenter. You measured twice before you did something. This is a great start. You start by looking at buildings and saying, how much energy do they use? And therefore, once you know what they're using, you can start to come up with strategies to reduce that energy cost. Of course, it costs money to actually fix buildings and make them more efficient, but in the long run, it saves everybody money. It makes things work better. We have an asthma crisis. That's not necessarily just a climate crisis. It's an air pollution crisis. We burn fossil fuels. It goes up in the air, not only the carbon dioxide, but all the pollutants that cause asthma, that cause other kinds of problems for our community. So this is a really good start. I am sure that there will be people with small technical tweaks to it. I never have problem with small technical tweaks, but this is as a concept is something that we absolutely need to do. And so I hope you all do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Greg. It looks like Serena Russell signed in, but she's not speaking. Caitlin Sanford.
Hello, members of the committee. I'm Caitlin Sanford. I live at 375 Rochambeau Avenue in Ward 3. Two. SANFORD. And I'm representing Climate Action Rhode Island. So people have mentioned, maybe 70% of our emissions come from buildings. The fact is we don't really know. These numbers are a bit old. Maybe 5 years old, older, might include city-owned buildings and not all the large buildings in the city, which is precisely why we need to get going and actually measure these buildings' emissions. So I'm pleased to support this ordinance. I think just getting a sense of what we're using will also allow building owners to implement efficiency measures, which save renters money, save us all money as taxpayers. So, a lot of the efficient heating and cooling technologies are actually cheaper now. And if we have some data to encourage people to switch, we could all be the beneficiaries. And I think that's what we've seen in other cities. You know, we don't need to wait. There's cities in our own region like Boston, Cambridge, Portland, Maine, but all across the country from Denver to Reno to Annapolis, Maryland, other cities have done this. And not only are they measuring the emissions, they're actually putting in penalties for building owners that don't improve efficiency. So I hope that we'll do that soon, given the urgency of what we're facing, the climate justice plan that we are hoping to make progress on, and progress has been slow. So I do hope that we can pass this initial ordinance and then also not delay, 5 years to then start enforcing the improvements is a long time when we have our mandate to implement the Act on Climate by 2023. So let's also remember to put in some assessments as soon as possible. I think limiting this to large buildings should protect some of the small business owners that the director mentioned that we're also concerned about. We also want to impair the city council to consider the staffing and funding of the Office of Sustainability to make sure we get this done. We did have some questions on the assessment section, especially 5135 and 5136. A little bit unclear, like if we're talking about future assessments or just the fines for not complying. So I'm sure you'll work on that. And then also about the campus exclusion, I think most of our campuses are doing a good job, but we were wondering about that as well. So this will be a really important first step in getting the emissions data, and then we're excited to see some incentives, be they sticks or carrots, to make those improvements. And I would also urge the committee to start thinking about part 2. If we are putting in place some of those assessments, getting some revenue, is that an opportunity to actually benefit people, right? So maybe that part 2 ordinance can specify where those funds are going. Can they go to energy efficiency funds? Can they help lower income families pay for their electricity bills? Can they go into targeted programs? We saw something interesting in Cambridge, Mass, where they are working with a company called Block Power that does renewable energy for multifamily homes and types of residences that don't get like rooftop solar and things like that. So with that, we encourage the committee to bring this forward and act on this. This bill has been waiting for a while, and it's beyond time to get it done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. And save the date, Block Power will be presenting to our committee at either our August or September meeting. So very excited about that. How about Amanda Barker?
Good evening. My name is Amanda Barker. I am a Providence resident, as well as the policy advocate at Green Energy Consumers Alliance. In case you aren't familiar, Green Energy Consumers Alliance is an environmental nonprofit working to speed the transition to a low carbon future. We have both programs and policies that help do that. Programs include, helping people get electric vehicles, heat pumps, solar panels on their roofs, and then policy. I am the policy advocate, so I advocate usually at the State House, but also at the city level as well. And I'm here tonight in support of the Building Energy Reporting Ordinance. I think we can no longer ignore that we are in a climate crisis. The Earth has reached its hottest temperature on record 4 dates in a row. We're experiencing extreme weather events, all across the country and the world. And even here in Providence, we've seen severe flooding that is only going to get worse if we don't take action. We do not have any more time to spare when it comes to climate action. And buildings are estimated to make up 70% of Providence's emissions and 30% of emissions statewide. Thankfully, we have the Act on Climate, which is a science-backed mandate requiring emissions reductions from the state of Rhode Island of 45% by 2030 and net zero by 2050. And if we want to meet that Act on Climate, we must tackle building emissions. 70% of our building stock in 2050 is already in place today. So when we talk about reaching net zero by 2050, we really need to start tackling building emissions now in order to get there. So the this ordinance is a great first step. because it requires large buildings in the city to report their energy usage and greenhouse gas emissions to the Energy Star portfolio, which is a free and secure EPA platform that has already been used by nearly 500,000 buildings nationwide. And the data collected will do two things. First, it will help building owners measure their emissions, compare with their neighbors, and then implement ways to reduce their energy usage. Just the awareness alone of how much energy you're using results in a 2% energy savings we found in states and municipalities that have already implemented this energy reporting. But the second thing, and in my opinion, the most important thing, is it'll enable the city to perform analyses and develop a standard by which building owners must reduce their emissions by. This is, of course, not required in this ordinance, but this is where the real emissions reductions would come from. And Green Energy Consumers strongly urges the city to enact a standard following the data collection so that we can actually start achieving the building emissions reductions necessary in order to meet the Act on Climate and mitigate the climate crisis. I do want to point out that this policy is not new. There are already 6 states and 40 municipalities with building energy reporting policies very similar to this one. In my written testimony, I have a map of where all those municipalities and states are. There's also 3 states and 9 municipalities that have already been collecting energy reporting data for quite a while now, and have taken that next step of implementing a building performance standard to actually require emissions reductions. And then there are several more that are still in development. So the city of Providence must join the 46 plus entities that already track building emissions so that it can better inform a building performance standard down the line and be more consistent with an Act on Climate and help mitigate the climate crisis. Thank you to Chair Inderbaugh for introducing this, and we urge passage. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Thanks. And Justin Boyan.
Hello, thank you for having this hearing. My name is Justin Boyan, B-O-Y-A-N. I live at 10 Jenks Street. Should I spell Jenks as well? Okay. I don't have very much to add to what Greg and Amanda and Aaron and Caitlin have said. I am fully in support of this bill. I believe Boston implemented their building reporting ordinance in 2013 when carbon levels were lower and my kids were 8 and 10 at the time. Now my kids are off to college. Providence, well, we took our time and produced a climate justice plan in 2019. I believe this ordinance was heard in 2021. Climate Action Rhode Island, which I was the president of at the time, sent 231 letters of support in 2021 to the city council supporting Bureau, and it didn't pass. And the inaction on government sort of, to me, remains frustrating in contrast with the freight train of climate change just barreling along while we dawdle on the tracks. So I'm here to say, please pass this ordinance, please fund the implementation of the ordinance. Please get the utility involved if possible, because they already know how much energy every building is using. So why should the building owners be put on the defensive and have to implement something new when the utility already knows how much energy every building is using? There must be a good reason for that, but I haven't heard it. And yeah, just for the sake of the city and our kids and this crisis, let's start making things happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin, and 100% agree. Angel Lopez.
Hello, I'm Angel Lopez, a resident of the Silver Lake neighborhood in Providence, 41 Dorchester Avenue. And I'm here as an unofficial advocate for my community. So the purpose of this ordinance is to improve energy efficiency and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So let's just take a moment and let's forget about the old appliances, the old way of doing things, and let's shift our focus to the new devices and the new way of doing things. So since 2017, Providence has been inundated with small wireless co-locations on telephone poles, on the light poles, on the sidewalks, along the rooftops of buildings, and on other property structures. So per the Rhode Island Small Cell Sitting Act of 2017, the residents have no say before these installations or after they're installed. Why? Because the property owners of the site, of the location, they can regulate themselves. So these devices operate 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and have become a nuisance to many of its neighbors, right? If it's in the neighborhood, I'm one of them. And they also risk the public health of residents living on the second and third stories of houses in Providence. In my zip code, most houses are 2 or 3 stories. So that's most of the residents in my neighborhood. So this ordinance, similar to the municipal energy reports published by the city of Providence, it doesn't distinguish or call out the energy consumption of these devices that are also occupying our public rights of way. And just to clarify, electricity in Providence, it comes from burning natural gas. And a small amount, hopefully growing, right, is coming from solar and wind. So I am here in opposition to this ordinance until it includes a mandate for every property with small cell co-locations to contribute to this benchmarking database, right? And as the ordinance stands right now, exception 1 can be granted if the property or the building on that property is not occupied, right? So there are unhoused or unused buildings, like unoccupied with people, and structures in the middle of neighborhoods in Providence, right? That have small cells on them. So a mandate is that considers the small cells as an occupant of the property will ensure that will solve this problem, but also ensure that residential high rises that have these small cells on them are also included, that they can't, be excluded. So the ordinance should also include installation of all the new devices co-located on public rights of way. So this will help determine something like if the stationary license plate readers that are on the sidewalks, if those devices are contributing to the climate justice plan or negatively impacting it. So I'm just asking you all, don't approve this ordinance until the energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions of the small wireless facilities, specifically those co-located on public rights of way and on unoccupied property structures, are included. If you can pass an ordinance for the license plate readers, and I stopped that state law from passing, you can include this in the ordinance and bypass Title 3932, which is what's creating this mess. And I have photos of some of these devices, none that are on the buildings. So if you
Could you
tell
hand
me
those to
that,
the clerks, please?
yes.
Thank you so much, Angel. I appreciate that. And thank you for the clerks for grabbing that. I think a few additional people, at least one, have signed in. Would you be able to bring up the sign-in sheet? Emily Koo, come on up.
Hello, thank you. My name is Emily Koo. I live at 14 5th Street in Councilwoman Anderbaugh's district. I just want to applaud the council and the administration for advancing the building energy reporting ordinance. It is, as we all know, a critical milestone in dramatically improving the efficiency of all buildings in Providence and ensuring emissions reductions and cost savings for our building owners and leading by example. Both my current organization, Acadia Center, which I did not mention, I'm with Acadia Center, and myself personally are proud to have been a part of the development of the ordinance and are eager to see it through to passage and implementation. So really harping on the urgency that folks have noted. I invite you to continue to consider the funding, staffing, software, and enforcement mechanisms that will ensure the success of this significant data collection and management undertaking, which I know we can all handle, but worth noting. I also would flag my concern and request the continued advocacy and assurance that the utilities provision and direct transmission of energy data not hinder the compliance of benchmarking and reporting obligations for our large building owners, and would love further updates about what that assurance looks like, since I think that could be a pretty significant loophole of just utility not responding to building owners, and that being an easy opt-out that shouldn't be readily available. The violations and enforcement section of the ordinance refers to a subsection that shouldn't be amended without a public hearing. I think that's in reference to the violations and enforcement section itself, but I think there's a typo in section N not existing, which is not material. I would actually like to say that I appreciate the sentiment of continued public input and would encourage the city to provide further details and opportunities for public feedback. It sounds like this is still quite an early stage here, and so it's being able to see how the ordinance evolves and what changes were made would be fantastic. And there's also a reference to regulations that the director will promulgate, and more information about that process I think would be really helpful to understand the potential impact of the ordinance based on how those are promulgated. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily. No one else is currently signed up. Is anyone else who's here hoping to provide public comment? Awesome. If not, then and all the testimony received will be attached to the ordinance. That's for the written testimony we received, and we did receive quite a bit of written testimony, which will be available. So thank you all for coming tonight. With that, I don't think we need to formally adjourn because it's just a hearing. Oh, great. We're just going to close this meeting with gratitude for you all joining tonight, and much more to come. So thank you all so much.